4 rookies attacked her in the mess hall. 30 seconds later, they discovered she was an undercover Navy SEAL. Nobody really noticed her at first. That was kind of the point. She walked into the mess hall every morning around the same time, 6:40, sometimes 6:45, got herself a black coffee and scrambled eggs, grabbed an orange from the fruit basket near the end of the line, and found the same corner table. Same spot, every day. Back to the wall. Clear view of the door. She would sit down, open a paperback book, and just eat, quietly, without talking to anyone. She was wearing plain navy coveralls, no name tag on the front, no rank patch on the sleeve, no unit badge, nothing that told you who she was or why she was there. To most people walking past her, she looked like maybe a civilian contractor who had somehow ended up in the wrong cafeteria, or someone's administrative assistant who had wandered too far from the office buildings. Nobody gave her much thought, which, again, was exactly the idea. But on the third morning, a group of 4 junior enlisted guys at a table nearby started paying attention to her. They were fresh out of training, only a few weeks into their first real assignment at the naval base in San Diego. Young, loud, full of that particular energy that comes from being 20 years old, newly in uniform, and very sure of yourself. The one leading the group, let's call him the loud one, because that's what he was. He had already made up his mind about who this woman was. In his head, she was nobody, a contractor, a support staffer, maybe someone's wife who had base access. Definitely not fleet, definitely not someone who belonged at a table in the main enlisted mess hall, reading a novel and acting like she owned the corner. He leaned over to his friends and said something. They laughed. He said something else. More laughter. Then he stood up. He walked over to her table, pulled out the chair across from her without asking, and sat down. She didn't look up from her book. "Hey," he said. She turned a page. "This table is for fleet personnel." She kept reading. He leaned forward a little. "I don't see a badge." "You got a badge?" "Nothing." "You a contractor or something? You know you're not supposed to be eating in here without proper ID showing." His 3 friends had gone quiet now, watching. A few other people in the mess hall had also noticed, including a master chief sitting 2 tables over, a man with nearly 3 decades in the Navy, who had seen a lot of things in his career and recognized immediately that something interesting was about to happen. He didn't move. He just watched. The loud one put his hand on the edge of her tray and pushed it slightly toward her. "I'm talking to you," he said. She closed her book. Not fast, not dramatically. She just reached over, pressed the cover shut with one hand, and set it down on the table beside her coffee cup. Then she looked up at him for the first time. She didn't look angry. She didn't look scared. She looked like someone who has been through enough genuinely dangerous situations in her life that a 22-year-old in a mess hall barely registers on the list of things worth worrying about. She reached into the chest pocket of her coveralls and pulled out a small badge case, black, worn at the corners, like it had traveled a lot. She set it on the table in front of him, flat, face up. He looked down at it, and that's when the 30 seconds started, because it took him probably 5 seconds to read what was on the card, another 5 seconds for it to actually sink in, and then about 20 more seconds of complete silence, while his brain tried to figure out what to do with the information it had just received. The badge said, Naval Special Warfare Command. The credentials behind it identified her as a senior chief petty officer with a special operations qualification rating. She was, in the plainest possible terms, a Navy SEAL operator, or more precisely, one of the extremely small number of women who had completed the full special warfare support pipeline and earned a classification that put her in direct operational contact with SEAL teams in the field. She had done this for 11 years. She had 2 overseas deployments on her record. She had qualifications in tactical operations, underwater work, advanced combatives, and field intelligence gathering. She had, in other words, forgotten more about real military service than this kid had yet had a chance to learn. He opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. She picked up her coffee cup, took a slow sip, and looked at him over the rim. "You're going to want to go talk to your division officer today," she said. Her voice was completely calm, almost bored. "Before I do." Then she picked up her book, stood up, collected her tray, and walked out of the mess hall. She left her orange on the table. She hadn't finished it yet, but she also clearly wasn't coming back for it. The 4 of them sat there in silence for a long moment, The three friends were staring at the door she had just walked out of. The loud one was staring at the table where her coffee cup had been. From 2 tables over, the Master Chief took a long sip of his own coffee, set the cup down, and went back to his breakfast without saying a single word. He didn't need to. Here is something worth understanding about what had just happened, and why it went the way it did. She hadn't come to that base to make a scene. She wasn't there to prove anything. She was 3 days into a 3-week classified assignment, an embedded evaluation, the kind where someone from Special Warfare Command is sent to observe unit culture, assess command climate, and document how people behave when they think no one important is watching. Her cover was a civilian logistics consultant. Her instructions were to stay low profile, eat in the common areas, move through shared spaces, see what you see. The plain coveralls with no markings were not an accident. The corner table with the back-to-the-wall positioning was not a coincidence. The book was real. She actually was reading it, but it also served a purpose. People overlook someone who is quietly reading. They walk past them, talk around them, act naturally. That's useful information if you're doing the kind of work she was doing. The irony that the kid had essentially walked right into the middle of her observation and had himself become the most notable thing she observed all week was probably not lost on her. But here's the other thing. She had been in situations that were genuinely dangerous. Situations where the wrong reaction meant real consequences for real people. She had learned a long time ago that the most powerful response is often the quietest one. She didn't raise her voice because she didn't need to. She didn't threaten him because she didn't have to. She just showed him, very calmly, exactly who he was talking to. And then she left. That's not weakness. That's the kind of discipline that takes years to build. The loud one went to see his division officer that same morning. He went on his own, before anyone called him in, which was, honestly, the smartest decision he had made since arriving at the base. He told the division officer what happened. All of it. He didn't leave anything out, partly because he was scared, and partly because somewhere in the last 2 hours, he had developed a very clear understanding that there was no version of this story where leaving things out helped him. The division officer listened. Then he was quiet for a moment. Then he said, very evenly, "You understand that the woman you just did that to has more service time than you've been alive, right?" The incident was formally documented. An official report was filed. His commanding officer was notified. He was assigned to additional duty and sent through mandatory command climate and professional conduct training. His 3 friends received the same. No formal charges were pressed. That was her call to make, and she made it. Not because what happened was acceptable, but because she had seen real problems in her career, and she understood the difference between someone who needed to be corrected and someone who needed to be destroyed. She chose correction. She noted in her evaluation report that the incident, while inappropriate, had resolved itself appropriately once the facts were clear, and that the individual had self-reported without prompting, which she considered relevant. That detail went into the report. It mattered. In the weeks that followed, something shifted in that unit. It's hard to explain exactly how these things happen, but they do. Word gets around on a base. People talk, and the story of what happened in the mess hall that Thursday morning, the woman with the plain coveralls and the worn badge case, and the completely unimpressed expression, started circulating in the way that useful stories do. The loud one became noticeably quieter, not broken, not humiliated into silence, just different, more careful, more observant. The kind of person who now looked around a room before deciding what kind of energy to bring into it. One of his 3 friends, about 8 months later, submitted an application to the Special Warfare Support Pipeline. He made it through the initial screening. Nobody knows yet where that goes, but the fact that he applied says something. The Master Chief, when asked by a junior officer what he thought of the whole thing, reportedly said only, "That's what right looks like," and then changed the subject. She finished her 3-week assignment and flew back to Virginia Beach. Her evaluation report was filed with Special Warfare Command. It covered a range of observations about unit culture, command climate, and the treatment of personnel whose roles were not visible in their insignia or rank markings. It became part of a broader internal review. She was never publicly identified in connection with the incident. She didn't give interviews. She didn't post anything. She went back to doing what she did, which included waking up before dawn most mornings and getting into the water. because that's what the job looks like when the cameras aren't on it. Years later, when that loud 22-year-old separated from the Navy and sat down for his exit interview, the officer conducting it asked him the standard question: "What was the most important thing you learned during your service?" He thought about it for a moment, and then he talked about a Thursday morning in a mess hall in San Diego, about a woman he had badly misjudged, about 30 seconds that had taken about 11 years to fully understand. He never learned her name, she never told him, but he had thought about her a lot over the years, not with embarrassment exactly, but with the specific feeling you get when someone teaches you something important by doing almost nothing at all. She had closed her book, set down a badge, said 12 words, walked out. That was it. That was the whole thing. And somehow, that quiet little moment in a corner of a cafeteria had done more to shape how he understood service, and rank, and judgment, and respect, than almost anything else that happened to him in uniform. The lesson here is not complicated. It doesn't need to be dressed up or made dramatic. Some of the most capable people in any room are the ones you'd never pick out of a crowd. They don't advertise. They don't perform. They don't need you to know who they are before they walk through a door. They've spent years building something real, and real things don't need to be announced. She was eating scrambled eggs and reading a book. She was doing nothing wrong. She was simply there, in her corner, living a life that had already taken her further and deeper and into more genuinely difficult places than most people will ever see. And 4 kids who didn't know any of that made the very old mistake of looking at what someone appeared to be and deciding they already knew the whole story. They didn't. Most of us don't, most of the time. That's the thing about quiet people. The ones who don't feel the need to tell you what they've done, or where they've been, or what they're capable of. The ones who sit in corners and read books and eat their breakfast in peace. Sometimes they're nothing. Sometimes they're exactly what they appear to be. And sometimes, you put your hand on their tray, and 30 seconds later, you find out exactly who you just made that mistake with.